hit record. First of all, thanks everybody for attending, taking time out of your day. I know this is probably the lunch hour for many of you, so I honestly really do appreciate that. Today's conversation is going to be very, very generic, very high level, very introductory. So I see a few of our IT contacts at some of our customers, and so this may be boring, it may be obvious, it may be self-evident of the content, but we wanted to get this out, and primarily what I'm talking about today is just kind of summarizing the cybersecurity awareness training that went out for quarter 1 for the customers that are on our full cybersecurity stack. So those of you that have taken that, this will be kind of a review. Those that have not, this will be kind of a summary of that. We still have been working with the point of contacts everywhere to make sure people get this training completed. It takes under 10 minutes or so, right? And many people ask me, well, it's so basic, it's so simple, is it worth it? And it most absolutely is. What we found is people can only pay attention for a certain amount of time. And so we want to provide some information to start creating awareness for some of these topics. And as we develop a more educated user base within your facilities and your organizations, the training can be more complex and more involved. But for now, we're trying to keep it simple. So today I'm talking about malware and ransomware. And again, it's top of mind, right? Because we are still seeing a lot of ransomware breaches, lots of detonated ransomware, and this is starting to slow a little bit. We're seeing a lot more kind of social engineering attacks now, but the ransomware incidence is still high, and so I still think it's important to talk about. We just went through an incident response plan or an incident complete response for a hospital in the state of North Dakota, and it was a full-blown ransomware detonation across their entire environment. So this stuff is still happening, and awareness is important. So start about malware. Ransomware is a form of malware, and I'll be talking about that in a little bit. But essentially, malware really is just any type of malicious software code, right? Obviously, we have software that we use every day that is not malicious, right? And we need this for our productivity, for our workday. Malware is code that is meant to provide damage to computer systems. It takes control, right, of those systems, kind of like a viral infection, which again is top of mind. We're just getting off the flu season, but it's the digital version of the flu. Ransomware is one of those forms of malware, and essentially is where software is detonated. We call it detonated. It's activated, right? The malware could exist on your system, and until it's detonated, right, it's just sitting there. But once it's detonated, it essentially is kidnapping your data. And the purpose, of course, is to make some money from this, right? So right now, we're seeing ransoms, in the 6 figures. A number of years ago, they still require Bitcoin as payment for ransom. It was a fraction of that, right? So the bad actors, the hackers, the bad guys are getting more bold in their demands for the amount of money, right, to exchange to get your data back. And how do they do that? Well, of course, the malware, right, once it's detonated, encrypts your data, and encryption in its simplest form means that it just scrambles it, right? Encryption in and of itself is not bad, right? We encrypt data to protect the information, the privacy and the integrity of that information when we send sensitive things to various parties. And that's fine, right? As long as both parties that are supposed to get that information have the ability to read it. And that's where ransomware comes in, is you just don't get the key to be able to open and read it. And of course, in order to get that back, these bad actors typically demand money, right, in exchange for some sort of software to be able to decrypt that stuff. And today, that typically is paid in Bitcoin, and the reason why Bitcoin is the currency of choice is because it's very difficult to track, right? It's a digital currency. I laugh about it because people know what crypto is now. They know what Bitcoin is, maybe some other types of cryptocurrency, and only because it's become kind of an interesting form of investment, right? At the end of the day, it's still a currency, a digital currency that bad guys use to exchange your data for. The interesting thing is many people believe that this happens only to big companies, right? They're, obviously if I'm a bad guy, I want to get the biggest bang for my dollar. But the truth is over 50% of ransomware attacks happen with organizations that are under 100 employees. And usually this starts through some sort of email. And we call that business email compromise, right? Where they send you some sort of email, it's taken over. Either the user will download a document. Those documents could be Office files. They could even be PDF, Adobe PDF files, which often some people think are safe, but they can still be filled with ransomware. .zip or .jar files are common. And once they get this data, after you've kind of made a decision, right, to click on something, to download something that triggers this, they often will take that data, maybe return it to you with a ransom, but they still will put it on the dark web. So in context with protections of how to make sure that you aren't clicking on stuff and making sure we have the software to do that, another piece, another layer of that is monitoring the dark web for any type of these credential compromises. But you still may get your data back, but it still may be put on the dark web. And the truth is, as I was doing more research for this as part of your training, only 8% of people that pay the ransom actually get their data back. And the truth is that pretty soon there's been discussion about at the federal government level to make ransom payments illegal, right? So if you are put in a position where you do not have the ability to recover after a ransomware detonation, you may have the law against you by paying and getting your data back. I'm not going to comment on whether I think that that's a good idea or not. I understand the intent, right? We want to be able to make it as difficult or as fruitful or pointless, right, for bad guys to do this. If they don't get paid, why do it? But at the end of the day, if it's your data, right, and you need to get it back, that would be kind of tough. And again, typical response to this, right? Obviously, we have two areas. We have prevention, which is around cybersecurity awareness training, kind of what we're doing today, right? Being able to recognize this kind of stuff. We have software, right, that we run. So we use endpoint detection and response stuff. Some of you are using Webroot. We're highly recommending people upgrade to Sentinel-1. We have backup and disaster recovery systems, right, as kind of that, that last resort, right? If data is encrypted or ransomed, to try to get that data back. But ultimately, just like any type of health issue, prevention is what we're shooting for. So what do you do? Well, obviously, if you get an email that you don't recognize, don't interact with it, right? I recommend not opening it. If you see that there's a file attachment, don't open that. Don't forward it. Just don't interact with it. And pretty much step two is notify your support people. If some of you guys have IT people on staff, let them know you're getting some of this stuff. Of course, some of the emails that you guys are getting are part of our phishing simulations, right? To try to make sure that we're reinforcing some of these things. But at the end of the day, if this is a real legit threat, we just don't want you interacting with that stuff. So I'm going to start a little poll here. And if you guys could just answer these 6 questions for me. Question number 1, ransomware is a type of malware, true or false? Go ahead and answer that. Make sure that this is working here. All right. So ransomware is a type of malware. True or false? Paying a ransom could be illegal. True or false? I'm not sure. Maybe my polls aren't working here. Oh, no, it's working. Question number 3. Ransomware is used by nation state threat actors. True or false? Russia, China. Number 4, paying a ransom guarantees the return of my data. Number 5, ransomware can be disguised as an office document. Number 6, PDFs do not carry ransom. Give you guys a few seconds here to complete that. Got about 61% of you that finished. 70, looking good. Keep it up. Yeah, so let's start at the beginning, right? So ransomware is a type of malware. It absolutely is a type of malware. And in a minute, I'm going to talk about other types of malware, right? But ransomware is the most dangerous, right? And most certainly is a type of malware. And again, that's just malicious code. Number 2, paying a ransom could be legal. Most of you got this right. That is true. The key word there, of course, is could. Currently, it is not, but there is talk to make laws against paying for private companies to pay a ransom. Number 3, ransomware is used by nation state actors. I didn't really talk about this in my summary, so that's fair. Most of you did get it right, and that is most definitely true. So nation state threat actors, Russia, China, these are countries, right, that are using ransomware as a tool for terroristic activities. It most absolutely is true. And in fact, one of the most interesting things, I did a training presentation at last year's Healthcare Compliance Association conference, the big one in Phoenix. And in preparation for that, I talked to our insurance provider, Travis, again, the person that we did this webinar with last week. And he was talking about how now some of the carriers are putting in acts of war exceptions in their policies. And of course, he was still unclear because it was, kind of new what that actually meant. But the implication is if a nation state like Russia, right, deploys ransomware in a private company, right, and you end up having to pay that ransom or deal with a recovery or cleanup effort, that insurance providers may not reimburse, right, the claim for that because it was considered active war. Paying ransom guarantees the return of my data. Everyone got that right. Absolutely not guarantee it. These aren't commercial-based software companies, right? Even if they do give you a decryptor tool, it's going to be buggy. It's going to take time. It's going to be messy, and there's no guarantee that you'll get your data back. Obviously, right? There's some incentive if they don't, if they don't give you your data back, and that becomes a consistent thing, less people are going to pay it, right? But there's still no guarantees. Ransomware can be disguised as an office document. Absolutely can be. And PDFs do not carry ransomware. That is absolutely false, right? Everybody got that right. So pretty good. As far as malware goes, so we talked about how ransomware is a form of malware, right? Well, there are all kinds of different types of malware, right? Some of them may include adware, right? We don't hear a lot about some of these anymore. They were more prevalent a number of years ago, right? But essentially, adware is where some form of malware, some malicious code is pushing advertisements right to you. Many of you are maybe old enough to remember the horrific pop-up nightmare, right? That could happen if you went to the wrong website, right? Pop-ups, software companies responded by putting pop-up blockers, that kind of fought that for a while. There's some anti-adware stuff that we're able to put on there. But essentially it's pushing advertisements to you, maybe things to your adding stuff to your browser menu bars, etc. Spyware is essentially a set of malware, right, where the intent is to secretly monitor a user's activity, right, and send it to its owner. And that's kind of goes in context with keyloggers, which are something similar, where the software is meant to record the keystrokes, right? And of course, the fear, right? The scary part about that is if you go to sensitive websites, right, and you start entering in your username and your password, and that gets recorded. Viruses, I think many of you, of course, are familiar with that. Back when I first started to get into technology, there was some of these viruses that were widespread, right? Honestly, globally, the I love you virus comes to mind. Some of you may remember that. And you think about how benign that really was. It was an inconvenience. Essentially what happened is it would basically pop up on the screen saying that that the bad guy loved you, right? I love you. And it spread across, right? But it essentially didn't really do any damage. It wasn't stealing data. It was just a nuisance, right? And you think about where we are today versus where viruses were in those days. But essentially viruses, software, again, malware that attaches to other files and then just replicates and copies itself. Worms are a little bit similar to viruses. They are also self-replicating code, but they are self-replicating, right? So, viruses, of course, usually take some activity, right? A user needs to click on something, download something, run something, right? Worms will just self-replicate. Trojans, as the name implied, all right, is software that disguises itself as something useful. Back years, maybe people remember using Napster or some of these peer-to-peer file sharing applications. We saw kind of an increase, right, in Trojan type activity, right, where people would download what they thought was legitimate, useful software, and it actually may have provided use, but it ended up just being a tool, right, to be able to bring in bad software into your system. We talked about ransomware, rootkits, right? We see these every so often. Essentially, a rootkit is software that is meant to achieve administrative permissions on a system, right? So it's bad software that provides some sort of mechanism where the bad actor is able to get elevated permissions. And of course, once somebody has elevated administrative permissions, that allows them to do more destructive things. Cryptojacking or cryptjacking is kind of a newer thing. So, kind of how cryptocurrency works, right, is there's an algorithm that that has to be kind of cracked. We basically call it mining, right? So as systems can crunch on that information, right, it takes a lot of processing power, it takes a lot of electricity. It can produce, right, and mine Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of these type of cryptocurrencies, right? And so bad actors don't want to waste their power and their electricity, because sometimes the amount of crypto that you can mine isn't enough to even pay the exorbitant amount of electrical or electricity bills that you have, right? So cryptjacking is where the bad guys will attach software to your system and have your computers, behind the scenes, work on mining cryptocurrency, and then they get the coins sent to them. So it degrades the performance. You end up paying for the power and electricity for that. It's just a bad deal. Exploits, it's a form of malware, right? But at the end of the day, it's taking a vulnerability that may be discovered or may not even have been discovered, but somebody has, right? And exploiting that for gain, right? And so obviously the things that we do in that example are we want to make sure that we're patching systems, right? That we're plugging those exploits. Malvertising is kind of similar to adware, right? Where it's bad code attached to other people's websites, other companies' websites, right, to get you to click on it, right, and then install bad stuff on your system. So so let's test a little bit of that knowledge. Question number one, if people could just answer for me. Ransomware is unwanted software designed to show advertisements on your screen, most often within a web browser. Typically, it will disguise itself as legitimate to trick you into installing it on your device. True or false? Ransomware. Number two, adware locks you out of your device or encrypts your files, then forces you to pay a ransom to get them back. Number three, a rootkit is malware that provides the attacker with administrative privileges to the infected system, is designed to stay hidden from the user and the operating system. True or false? I'll let everybody take a chance to answer these. %69%, just a couple more seconds. I'll let people finish up if they can. So ransomware. What is ransomware? Is it unwanted software designed to show advertisements on your screen? Not quite. So this one was kind of tricky. It looks like for people. Essentially, this is adware or malvertising, right? So ransomware is more number two, locks you out of your device, encrypts your files, and then forces you to pay a ransom. So the wording may be confusing, but at the end of the day, ransomware, right, encrypts your data, right? You click on something, you download something, you install something, it encrypts your data, makes it unviewable. And then in order to be able to get it back, it'll provide a message saying, hey, you need to pay this amount of Bitcoin, right? Versus adware or malvertising, right, it's designed to show advertisements on your screen, typically tries to do pop-ups, often linked to other companies' websites, right, that can still install bad software. And finally, everyone got the rootkit question right. Rootkit is just malware that provides the attacker with administrative privileges to infected systems. And again, it's designed to stay hidden. Not too bad, not too bad. So again, what do we do, right? So kind of in our business, right? We talk about left of bang, right of bang. Maybe some of you have heard of this concept, right? Bang is when the bad event happens, right? Maybe ransomware or some sort of incident or security breach happens, right? Left of bang is the activities that you do before that happens, right? Preventative actions, right? And typically these things are, again, cybersecurity awareness training, right? Making sure that people understand what the risks are, what the bad stuff is that's out there, why people do it, kind of being able to recognize it when they see it. I know it's difficult, right? But I think more and more people are becoming more critical, right? When they receive something, they're more cautious, right, in opening messages. People aren't downloading or interacting, right, with those messages that they aren't sure about, right? You know, a number of years ago, people were still responding to Nigerian prince emails, right? Today, people are smarter, right? They're more savvy. Of course, the bad guys are getting more sophisticated in that, but it's being able to recognize some of those things, right? Other preventative or left of bang measures, right, that we help you guys with is again the technology around it, right? So for those of you on full stack, right, we do email security, right, which adds different layers of phishing protection, malware protection, antivirus, right? Obviously, spam is part of that. We do things like sandboxing emails, right? So as emails come into your system, right, we're reviewing those for potential malware or bad sites that we are aware of, and then preventing you from even opening those things, right? We're trying to block, right, phishing attempts. we use endpoint detection and response software. So, the old days we called it antivirus, right? Well, we're starting to get to new generations. We call them next generation, right? Software that's using artificial intelligence to look at behavior that is happening on your workstation and determining whether or not that is normal behavior or not. The software that we use to help push patches, right? Of course, patching is one of the biggest things that help with that. But there's also a piece that we are rolling out, right, for all of you full stack customers, again, that is we call VSA ransomware protection. It's another step, right, where if it detects some anomalous behavior that wasn't caught by your EDR, that wasn't caught from the email security, and people were maybe aware, but they still made poor choices and clicked or downloaded something, it's meant to disable that computer from talking on the network, right, to prevent spread. My point is like it's a layered approach, right, that we need to take. The end users, your employees, your staff have a tremendous responsibility as well, because we could put all of that stuff in place. And if people make poor decisions, we have to deal with those consequences. So what are the consequences? Well, that's right of bang, right? Okay, event happens. Ransomware is deployed, right? That's where the hard work becomes, I guess just happens, right? We have to deal with recovery efforts, right? So dealing with incident response plans, who do we call? Making sure you have cyber liability insurance, and making those calls. It's recovering using data backups and being able to get your information back, right? It's communication, it's legal, it's all those other things, right, that become necessary right of bang. So how do we stay left of bang? Well, all that software, right? If something does happen, what do you do? Well, obviously we don't want to interact with the software, and we don't want to, and we want to make sure we contact IT. I pretty much kind of gave you the answer to this one, right? But what is the best thing to do, right, if you suspect you have malware? We had some of the phishing simulation stuff that you might see is very, very specific, right? Well, like we're saying, hey, this is IT support, right? And your password is wrong. You should click on this link and update it, right? So even things that you see that you think maybe from your boss, your manager, or even North Star, just take a special critical eye to it. We're just a phone call away, right? Or email us. If you have any question whatsoever on something that you're receiving, right? And then of course, as we kind of start participating now in upcoming strategic business reviews, some of the items will be about incident response planning, business continuity planning, those kind of things. All that stuff is important, but that's all I have today. Essentially what I talked about is in those Q1 training classes. There's 3 of them. Highly encouraged to make sure everybody gets those out. Kara has been sending out reports of people, the status of that, but make sure people take this stuff seriously. It's important. I've got time for questions. If anybody has any questions, I'll try to do the best to field them. I was hoping to keep this under 30 minutes. We're going a little bit over, but if anybody has any questions, I'll gladly stay on. And again, for those of you that are IT people, and yeah, so you can use the Q&A. There's a Q&A button, hopefully on your Zoom controls. Looks like a couple people use it for answering some of the poll questions, but and like I said, if any of you guys want a copy of that recording of Travis and I talking about cyber liability, how to prepare for an incident, right, or incident response planning through your cyber liability insurance providers, just email me or Amber, and we'll happily send you a link to that. We did, as part of that, send out a template, right, for an incident response plan, just to kind of put it into context of how important that is. The ransomware response that we did over October and over Halloween into November, that customer did not have their incident response plan in a format that was viewable. It was an email, and it was actually an email that caused the problem to begin with, right? So disaster recovery planning and incident response planning is important. Any questions? If not, I will give you back some time. You guys can go get your lunch. We will this is recorded, so we'll send it out to attendees. We'll probably send it to others if you want us to. So. All right, everybody. I appreciate your time, your commitment to this. It is an important topic. Obviously, we need everybody's help, and hopefully this will be useful for you guys as we move forward. But thanks, everybody. Talk to you later.